першому воркшопі. Я дуже рада вітати Джон Марш. Вона колишня президентка Європейської асоціації наукових редакторів, і зараз вона очолює редакцію Lancet. Це одне з провідних видань, які належать до групи видань Lancet. Психіатрія сама по собі вона дуже цікава, я так розумію. І вона надзвичайно має багатий досвід і хоче поділитися з нами такими основними питаннями, якими ми зустрічаємося всі в своєму практичному житті. Це що пов'язано з публікаційною етикою, з конфліктами інтересів, з проблемами рецензування, як це вирішується. І наприкінці дуже цікавий тут деякі досвід регулювання конфліктів, можливий варіант, який пропонується от саме в цій групі. Я не буду нікого затримувати в лекції. Прошу залишитись для обговорення і поточного воркшопу. І лекція, як завжди, буде англійською мовою, але слайди перекладено українською мовою. Будь ласка, не соромтеся, ми тут для того, щоб обмінюватися досвідом, а не перевіряти чиїсь знання якихось мовних іноземних. Тому ви можете або в чаті писати, або задавати питання. Це буде абсолютно нормально, і ми навпаки будемо надзвичайно цьому раді. Dear Joan, the floor is yours. Should I present your slides? Or yeah, I'm stop sharing.
I'll share mine. Can you all make sure you're on mute, please, so we don't have background noise? And then here. Okay, everyone see the slides and beautifully translated. Well, I presume it's beautifully translated by Iryna. So thank you all for coming. For those of you who attended my webinar last time, some of the content is the same, but some of it will be new. So hopefully there's of interest to everybody here. And so we're going to focus on research integrity for journal editors. And this fits with the mission of scholarly publishing. So what are we trying to do with our publishing? And that is to improve the global standard and quality of science editing by promoting the value of science editors and supporting professional development, research, and collaboration. This is the mission of EASE, and we're working with you and the chapters to do this. So in terms of publication ethics, there's three facets to this, three sides. So good ethics ensures the integrity of the academic literature. It's part of general research ethics, and it enhances trust in the literature. And many things now are showing us how important it is that the general public can trust what we publish in the literature. So as authors, readers, scientists, we all need to believe that what we read published in good journals is high quality.
Саша пишет, что Сантоха связь через Viber или Telegram по-прежнему его нет.
Olha, you need to be...
Я могу вообще скинуть номер карты, вообще бомба будет.
Пани Ольга.
Карта, это в смысле дедушки перекидывают.
So you have, can you please switch host power to me and I will deal with it.
I can if I can, so to speak.
You can't, but Mary can.
No, I can because I'm Mary now. But I'm not very good at all these things. More. I don't know, it's fine. Okay. We'll carry on. So what we're going to do is to, this talk is based on the COPE Ethics Toolkit. So COPE is the Committee on Publication Ethics. They have a lot of really, really good material and it's all freely available. So your journals can join COPE, or you can, your publisher might join, but even if you're not members, you can access their material and it's very useful. And these slides will be available afterwards. So you don't need to make notes. We can send you the slides and you will have all of the links. So what COPE does, and they say journals should have robust and well-described practices for all the areas within the COPE core practices. And journals should be transparent about their processes and business practices, according to the principles of transparency and best practice in scholarly publishing. And this word transparency comes up a lot. So it's not enough just to do the right thing. You have to show that you're doing the right thing. So your journal's website must make it very clear that you are following good practice. Okay, so we need to declare everything on our journal websites. And this is what distinguishes us with our good journals from predatory journals. So predatory journals lie about their business practices for the purpose of attracting paying authors. They just want the money. They will publish anything submitted as long as the author is willing to pay. And this detracts from the quality of the scientific record and undermines public trust in science. So we want to make it clear that our journals are not predatory journals, they are good journals. So the first requirement is that the journal should have clear policies that allow for transparency around who contributed to the work and in what capacity, for requirements for authorship and contributorship. So there are two different groups of people here. There are the authors, and then there are contributors who are not authors. And we now go to another organization. Like COPE, this is made up of many different editors from different journals. And this is the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, known as ICMJE. Although it's medical, this information is true for all disciplines. So science, law, physical sciences, social sciences. This is true for everyone. So you can use these guidelines. And what the committee says is it is not the role of editors to make authorship decisions or to arbitrate conflicts related to authorship. So the authors have to decide who is an author on their study and who is just a contributor. And the ICMJE have published guidelines for this. So these are the requirements for an author. So this is the person whose name appears under the title as an author of the paper. So they've had intellectual input. So they've used their thoughts and they've contributed to the ideas in the paper. Has made substantial contributions to the concept, design, data acquisition, analysis, or interpretation. So they have to have contributed to the study, but it might be in the idea for the study, in the actual collecting the data, analysis, or interpreting the data afterwards. So you can see here, this is the role for the junior author, who is doing some of the data acquisition and writing, and the senior author who is guiding the interpretation. And then every author should have been involved in drafting the article or revising the content. And then give final approval of the version for submission. So all authors have to say, I have approved this final submitted version. And that is because they then are saying they are prepared to take personal responsibility for the paper's integrity. So when you see examples in the press of papers being retracted and senior authors saying, oh, I didn't know, my student did this, I had nothing to do with it, we can't believe that. These authors should be signing forms that say we approve the version that is submitted to the journal and we take responsibility for that paper. Just have a quick look in the chat. Nope, that's okay. Iryna, I will leave the chat to you.
Yeah, it's okay, it's fine. I will take care about it.
So one thing that comes up in some sciences is we're now getting very large author groups. So for medicine, this happens in some clinical trials, in genetics, it's very common in physics. I don't know about your disciplines, but I took this from the Lancet's author guidelines. So if we have more than 30 authors, and actually more than 20 is when we start asking, we ask whether they can use a collaborator or a study group. And when we do this, instead of it saying the author is Joan Marsh and Iryna Izarova, it says the author is GBD 2019 Mental Disorders Collaborators. And sometimes you can have named first or second authors and the study group, or sometimes we just have the study group. And it makes it much, much easier for editors not to have all those names. But it's important for authors to make sure that in databases like PubMed and Scopus, they are credited as authors of the paper. And that can happen. So the members of the study group still go onto PubMed and that's their paper. And what we ask them to do is we ask the lead author to send a separate Word file, a document, with a table of first names and surnames. And this is just so that we get the spelling correct, because that table is then sent directly to PubMed and the other databases for indexing. And then, as I said earlier, there are also people who are contributors, but are not authors. And these are people who provide technical help. They might be co-writers or editing assistants. It might be a department chairperson who provides only general support. It might be scientific advisor on a project, or data collectors. So people in the field who collected data, but did not have input into the analysis and the writing. But as I said before, as an editor, it's not your job to decide who is who. The authors have to decide. And then the people who are not authors are mentioned in the acknowledgements section. And again, for transparency, we ask authors to provide evidence that the person who's mentioned in the acknowledgements has seen the paper and has agreed to their name being included. So in the past, I have edited papers for people and they have said, we'll put your name in the acknowledgements. And I said, no, because not all authors respond to an editor's comments. And you think, no, I don't want my name on this paper. So please, no. Okay. And then at the end of the paper, many medical and other science papers are now saying which authors did which parts of the study. And this has been formalized by a group called Credit, which is Contributor Roles Taxonomy. They have chosen 14 roles that contributors might do. It's not actually that good for medicine, but we use this, we encourage authors to use this as the basis for saying which authors did which parts of the study. Right, so that's authors. We now go on to peer review. And another thing that predatory journals do that we want to be transparent, we do not do, is we do good peer review practice, whereas predatory journals will claim to provide peer review and probably don't provide any peer review at all. So again, on your journal's website, you should have clear processes saying what is peer reviewed, as in which type of submitted article you send for peer review, what model of peer review is used, and how that process is managed. So I've taken these examples from European Science Editing, which is E's very own journal. And in our information for authors, it says, original articles are subject to peer review by at least 2 independent experts in the field. Reviews and viewpoints by at least 1 independent expert. So by independent, we mean someone who's not on our editorial team. So if I review something, I don't count as an independent expert because I'm on the editorial team for European Science Editing. Peer review is single blind, with reviewers having the option to sign their reviews. So single blind means that the authors are known to the reviewers, but the reviewers are not necessarily known to the authors, but they can sign their reviews. And if they sign their review, we will pass that name on to the authors. So then it's an open peer review process, but we don't publish the reviews in any way. And then the chief editor makes the final decision as to whether to publish. And this is probably the case in most journals, that responsibility stops with the chief editor. So then the next point is how your journal handles misconduct. And what Cope says is journals must have processes in place to respond to allegations of research, publication, and review misconduct, whether before or after publication. So this is misconduct by authors or misconduct by peer reviewers. And they have there are more Cope guidelines. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but if you want more on this, it's in Cope has a section dedicated to each of these places where you can find more information. And what we do ask for at all the Lancet journals and at European Science Editing is we ask that authors and peer reviewers disclose their competing interests or conflicts of interest. Someone is not muted.
А навіщо зараз фотографії? Можна спитати? Зараз вони саме потрібні.
Колеги, я вас дуже прошу, вимкніть мікрофон.
Hang on.
Тобто це не на права, це просто для документів. Я до чого веду? Бо там було або 3×4, або 3,5×4,5. Виді є?
Okay, so a conflict of interest.
Зрозуміло. Принесемо, да, я теж принесу.
Вимкніть мікрофон, будь ласка. Хто редмі?
Ну, тут не таке є. Ну, я зробила, подивлюся, що там різні.
John, could you please
Там до 6.
near me there is three points and you can choose for instance you can choose me as a host.
I can't see where to do that.
Please find my picture on your Zoom.
On your picture, yeah.
Yeah, and at the right corner upstairs here,
Host, got it.
and you can find
You are now the host.
okay, fine.
Okay, I will continue. Sorry, oh no, I've stopped sharing. Share screen.
I give you, yeah, it's fine.
Okay, there we go. So, let me see all this, right. So a conflict of interest exists when an individual or the individual's institution, your university or your company, has financial or personal relationships with other people or organizations that inappropriately influence, bias his or her actions. And obviously, conflicts of interest can undermine the credibility of the journal, the authors, and of the science. And I think we're all aware of financial conflicts, but it's the personal ones. So financial include employment, consultancies, stock ownership, so you own stocks and shares in a company, and honoraria, so payment for a guest lecture. But conflicts can occur for other reasons, such as personal relationships or academic competition. And this is where things can get difficult. Again, it's not the job of the editor to know everything. You cannot know all of these difficulties. What we do is we ask authors, editors, peer reviewers to declare their competing interests, and we publish those for authors. So we do ask the peer reviewers, so this is now Lancet on our editorial manager, which we use for manuscript submission. We ask the peer reviewer to declare, to clarify whether you have a financial or other conflict of interest with the authors. And then it's a drop-down box. They can say, no, I have no conflict of interest. Or if they say yes, they ask to give details. And quite often someone will say, I have published with these authors in the past, but I'm not working with them now. Or one of my PhD students now works on this study. You know, there are lots of links in academia. And if you have the right person peer reviewing the paper, then they probably might well have worked with these authors in some way. And all we're asking is that they tell us, and then we make a decision. So if someone says, yes, I've worked with these authors in the past, and they say, the paper's great, accept it. I'm like, I think I need another peer reviewer. But if they say, I've worked with them in the past, and then their review is a good page of major constructive criticism, we'll go, okay, they know this work and they are being objective. So we will count this as a good review. So this is my declaration. So I'm editor-in-chief of the Lancet Psychiatry, and this is published by Elsevier. So I do try to make that clear to people. I work for Elsevier and the Lancet Group. I'm also an honorary editor of European Science Editing. So everything I do for EASE is not paid, it's honorary. And I chair the EASE Gender Policy Committee. Again, that's honorary. So these are my declarations that I sometimes put in my email signature, or if I'm giving a talk. I try to keep all this clear. And then on our Lancet Psychiatry website, we have a section called Meet the Editorial Team. It says the editor-in-chief is the final arbitrator of all decisions. That's me. And then Joan Marsh, editor-in-chief, and then it just says my little biography. So it's very clear if you go to the Lancet Psychiatry website, who's the editor-in-chief, who's making the decisions, and hopefully that's all out in the open. And again, predatory journals, they misrepresent their editorial board members. They often claim board members or people are on their editorial board when they're not. And so what we need to do as editors is to have clear information on who is on our editorial board, and obviously have permission from those people and engage with them. So we think that the basic information you need is their name, their affiliation. We think it's good to have a picture because that helps in terms of gender balance, ethnicity balance. You can see if you've got a diverse board or if it's lots of people who all look the same, and a short biography. And this is the Lancet's editorial board. It's just very small, but you can go to our website. So for each person, we have a picture and a brief description. And I actually ask them to update every year. Has anything happened? And we refresh our board. So some of these people have been on the board for about 10 years. And some they do 2 or 3 years, and we have them under contract. So we don't pay them, but they have a little contract that says until December 2022. And if we think they haven't done a good job, we will say, thank you very much. your term has ended, goodbye, and we recruit someone else. So the next thing in the COPE requirements is about data availability, use of reporting guidelines, registration of clinical trials, and other study designs. This is quite a large section, and not everything will be relevant to all types of journal. But in terms of data sharing, this is now becoming much more common and popular in the sciences, so the biological and physical sciences. And so the Lancet journals have a policy about data sharing, and it's in our information for authors. And what we say is all submitted research articles must contain a data sharing statement. Now, this is not to say they must share their data. All they have to do is say what the author's policy, which is usually the funder's policy, is about data sharing. So what the authors declare in the paper is whether data collected for the study, including individual participant data, and a data dictionary defining each field in the set, will be made available. What data will be made available? So if you say we will make data available, what data will that be? Whether additional documents will be available. So is there a study protocol? Is there a statistical analysis plan? When they will be made available. So sometimes people say we'll make them available in 2 years, or we'll make them available for 1 year. Generally, it's on publication. Where those data will be, so you might give a URL and say the data are hosted on this website, or you might say data can be obtained by contacting this person and give an email address. And then by what access criteria data will be shared. So we'll share with anybody, we'll share with people who submit an approved protocol, who have to sign a data access agreement. Again, it's not your job as editors to get the details. We're just asking the authors to tell us what's going on. Right, so that's data sharing. So the next one is journals must publish clear guidelines on the ethical conduct of research according to the research discipline. So any research with human participants, you need to consider whether informed consent is required. So if the study authors have contacted people, and this can be online in an online survey, and said, will you answer these questions? And then we will use your data and we will publish. Participants must have given informed consent for this. And they should have had full information about what it means for them to take part and give consent before they start the research. And again, this has come from clinical trials, but it applies to the social sciences. There's a really good website that I mentioned here from Oxford University, which has a lot of information about informed consent and ethical conduct of research. And I didn't put anything, but if your journal publishes research on animals, there's guidelines around ethical conduct of research in animals, and you should say in your information for authors which guidelines you expect them to follow. So then the next one from COPE is that copyright and publishing licenses must be clearly described, as well as any author or reader fees. So the authors need to know what the copyright situation will be and whether it's going to cost them anything. So this is from European Science Editing, and we state very clearly, copyright is retained by the authors. So the author's grantees are licensed to publish the article and identify itself as the original publisher. The authors grant any third party to right to use the article freely as long as the original authors and citation details are identified. And the article and any associated publishing materials, so this might be a data set, it might be the appendix, is distributed under the Creative Commons license CC BY4. So this is what European science editing does. And European Science Editing is a diamond open access journal. We don't charge any fees. Lancet Psychiatry is a difficult one because we're hybrid and we have lots of difficult conditions. So I didn't talk about that. But Lancet Public Health, which is one of our journals, is a gold open access journal. So what they say on their website is to support the costs of publishing, including internal, editorial, and external review, technical, copy editing, typesetting, graphics, online hosting, archiving, promotion, all those things we do. Authors pay an article processing charge on acceptance. The APC can be paid by authors, authors' institutions, or funding bodies. And the decision to accept or reject a paper at the Lancet Group is made by peer review editors and is not related to the ability to pay. And we actually don't see the information around payment when we're making our editorial decisions. And we, as the Lancet Group, this is the whole group, will always make it possible to publish accepted papers, and we offer support for discounts and waivers. So that's our policy clearly described, and authors can contact us if they want more information. So that's policies around publishing and charging. The next one COPE asks for is journal management. So they ask for a well-described and implemented infrastructure, including the business model, policies, processes, and software for efficient running of an editorially independent journal, as well as the efficient management and training of editorial boards and editorial and publishing staff. Now, I found this another one that was quite interesting because this is such a huge area, and it's one that we don't necessarily say much about in our information for authors. But if you're applying to join COPE or join Scopus, or you want your journal to be well recognized, the more you can tell people about these processes, the more transparent you are. So what I found from European Science Editing is we have a clear statement about how we check for plagiarism, our policy about preprints and secondary publication. So we say manuscripts are checked for text similarity with Crossref similarity check software, and then manually checked to determine whether any non-original text flagged by the software shows evidence of plagiarism. So we use the tool to highlight possible plagiarism, and then we use a person and our brains to say, is this plagiarism or is this citation? Manuscripts containing materials suspected of plagiarism will be handled by following the relevant COPE flowchart and guidelines from ICMJE. And again, these two organizations have more detail on what to do if you suspect plagiarism. So for European Science Editing, we will consider manuscripts already available as preprints. If the article is accepted, authors will be requested to update any pre-publication versions with a link to the final published article. So we at European Science Editing will publish something that has been made available as a preprint, and the authors are then supposed to go to the preprint server and make sure there is a link to the final version in European Science Editing, because we want readers to come to European Science Editing and read the final peer-reviewed edited version and to cite that version, not the preprint. And then in terms of secondary publication, contributions based on published material, such as meeting abstracts, should be identified at the time of submission and in the article. So in the cover letter, they should say this was presented at the EASE conference in Valencia in June 2022, and you put that in the article as well. So readers and peer reviewers know that it has already been presented in some way. But at European Science Editing, we will consider such manuscripts for publication as long as original analyses or opinions are provided. So we want something a bit more than just the published conference abstract. So then journals should describe how they manage post-publication debate and perform corrections and retractions. Now, this is an area people do think about when they think about ethics. You publish something and some readers disagree in some form with what the authors say. So EASE has a standard retraction form. I couldn't copy the link into here, but if you go to the EASE website as members, you can download this retraction form. And if there's a problem, ask Mary, but it's there. And that's very useful. We have quite a well-defined procedure at the Lancet journals for corrections and retractions. And two of my colleagues have written an article about that, and they presented the data in Valencia, but we haven't published the article yet. So we're hoping the article will be published in European Science Editing, but that's a very detailed description of what we do. Post-publication debate can be letters to the editor. It might be you allow comments next to papers. It might be through social media. So what we say for Lancet Psychiatry is that any substantial error in any article should be corrected as soon as possible. Blame is not apportioned. So when we publish correction, we're not saying this is somebody's fault, they've done something wrong. We're just saying something was published that was not accurate, and we're now setting the record straight and publishing the correct information. And then Lancet journals, we have a policy for the types of errors we do and do not correct. So we will always correct any error affecting a drug name, the dose or unit, a numerical edit error, or a factual error in the interpretation of the results, because all of these things affect the science. If it's just a typo in the introduction, we won't do a correction. And then another one that we hope is not necessary, but probably is the journal and publisher must have guidelines in place to handle complaints against the journal, its staff, the editorial board, or the publisher. And, I'm sorry. So at the Lancet, we have an ombudsperson. We used to have an ombudsman, but we now have an ombudsperson. So what it says in our information for authors is if you need to question an editorial decision, your first step should be to contact the editorial team, the editor-in-chief. If you're not satisfied with our response, your next point of contact is our ombudsperson, whose task is to record and, when required, investigate allegations of editorial maladministration. Our files will be freely open to their inspection, and confidentiality will be respected in all cases. Our ombudsperson's remit does not extend to areas normally covered in our correspondence columns, which are issues of editorial content and editorial policy. So we have our letters column, but if someone is not happy with the way we have handled the paper and we try to resolve it, we might have a phone call, we have emails, but if at the end they're not happy, we refer them to our ombudsperson, and that's an independent person who's accepted that role for all the Lancet journals. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope you're all right. So this is our London Eye. Anyone who's been to London, this is you can get on and go round. And it's not like it anymore, but back earlier this year, it was in blue and yellow, and I took a picture of it. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. We are really, it's really important, and we're all grateful for your support, for support from EASE during this very hard period of all Ukrainians. So thank you very much for this excellent presentation. I would say that's absolutely new and very, very useful for all our editors. So I have a few questions, and I hope my colleagues too. So please just raise your hand. Dr. Kravtsov from Kharkiv University, and from our journal too.
Thank you, Iryna. Thank you all. I'm very glad to see you all, and very carefully listened to your presentation. And I have one question to you. The majority of our Ukrainian journals are in the in-house journals belong the university to the university. Is there a conflict of interest when they published their academies or authors? Because there are less journals who conducted to independent society. It's because a lot of our journals really conducted only in some national university.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think there is not. You know, that is why universities have journals, is to publish research from their staff and researchers. What you just need to make clear is that there is that potential conflict of interest. So you declare, you know, these staff work at the university, but you might say the authors of this study are employed by the university, which owns the journal, but had no, you know, they're not on the editorial board. So you declare they had no role in the decision concerning the paper. Okay, and it may be, you know, if it's a very small department, and you know, the smaller it gets, the more potential conflict of interest there will be. But all you do is just make that very clear, and then it's up to the reader. And if the reader wants to say, that's just Kharkiv, and they always publish good stuff from all their people, and we don't believe it, that's their problem. So I would say it is a competing interest, but it's not a reason not to do it. Okay, so you can publish those, but just make it very clear.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Olga. Please, Olga Dunayevskaya from Taras Shevchenko University from Ukraine.
Hello all. Hello, Joan. Thank you very, very much for such great insight. Now you opened a bit my eyes and managed to focus my attention to the things I didn't focus previously on. So I've got the question probably that refers to you, to your own experience. That is, I was particularly interested in acknowledgements, and when you talked about the contributors to the article, for example, there could be some people that firstly they gave their consent to publish their names and to mention their names, but then due to some unknown reason they want to retrieve it, but the article has gone through the process. I mean, the article is already in the final stage. Probably you've got such problems, or how did you handle such issues? What should we as the editors do?
Okay, so if at any stage there is a problem with the authorship, somebody wants to go on or come off, and that would be the same for the acknowledgements, we just stop the process. So we hold it and we say to the authors, you now need to resolve this problem and then send us a letter or a form signed by everyone to say, this is what you have now agreed. So if someone's going on, then that new person, we need their signature, but we need the signature of all the original authors to say they're happy that this person was forgotten and is now on. And if someone wants to come off, because sometimes, you know, during peer review, things come out and they say, oh, I don't want to be on this paper anymore. Then again, the other authors have to say, we agree that this person's name can come off. So it's not your job. You push it back to the authors and say, please sort this out, and we'll hold the paper. And then when they've resolved it, you continue from whatever stage you've got to.
Good,
Okay.
everything is clear. Yeah, right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, that's also very important and very widely spread, I would say, in Ukrainian practice, conflicts between authors and contributors. Even I had a problem with translation, authors and contributors, because as usual, we use the same notion to like to describe the role of person who contribute something to this publication. So actually, if I may, nobody else don't wish to ask Joan, so may I ask about credit taxonomy? Because in credit taxonomy we have 14 roles of contributors. So contributors means all authors and contributors as well, so we can choose who is the authors in our, you know, vision.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I've never thought about that before, but they use contributors, I think, to cover, so some contributors will be authors, but not all of them. And I mean, credit's it's quite a new organization. I've never talked with them. It's something that Ease probably could do with talking to them, giving them some feedback. So at Lancet, we said, we don't really like, we won't say you must use it because the roles don't match people in medical type studies. But we encourage them to use it, because what we want from an Ease perspective is, it's the same with the Ease retraction form. We'd really like everything to be in a common format, so that then when researchers of journals and publishing want to say, you know, how many papers were retracted and for what reason, how many, well, contributors is more for the funders. So the funders want to say, who did which bit of the study, or for credit, you know, so when you go for promotion, you can say, look, I was on this paper and I did this bit or this study. So it's all for external people to be able to check. And the more we can standardize the way those things are described, the easier it is to compare for whoever's trying to make that decision. But it is, yeah, so I think with credit, yes, ironically, we do say it's contributors, but then our authors will say author contributions. So perhaps it should be contributors or something. I don't, yeah, so it is contributors. What is, I think our papers say author. I'm just going to find what we actually put in a paper.
Also, you split it to authors and contributors. So for instance, translators.
They would go in the acknowledgements.
Translators, absolutely. Chief departments, I agree that's the best idea for them to be only in acknowledgement.
So I'm just going to, I'm going to share my.
Okay, one more question.
Okay. Let me just show you one more so let me just share this, Iryna. Go to Zoom. Share screen. So this is a very small Lancet one. I need to make it bigger now. Ugh. So what we say at the end of a Lancet Psychiatry paper says contributors, all authors contributed to writing the manuscript. So-and-so did the analysis, they all verified the data, had access to data, etc. So yeah, it's quite confusing that we're using these words contributors and authors. And then we have acknowledgements, which here is all the families and children, the centers, the charity, and then the funding. So yeah, I think it's quite a gray area.
So we need to put, for instance, translators into the part with contributors or into the part with acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement if they're not authors. Yeah. So unless if they're just translating, that would be acknowledgements. If they were also an author, they might have done the work, like you might do the work and translate, and then you would. So then you're an author with your contribution listed, and part of your contribution would be the translation.
Yeah, sure. Marina Zhenchenko, Vice Chair of our chapter.
Hi to all. Mary, thank you very much for your very informative presentation. How do you feel about open online peer review practice? It is better than blind review. Or no?
I personally, I'm not a great fan of open online peer review because I'm very lucky. So at the Lancet, we have a really strong family of journals, and people want to peer review for us, and they do a really good job. So they provide a lot of detail. They can be quite critical. I mean, constructive criticism and less. And to the authors, they're usually polite and, what a nice paper, well done. And to me, they're saying, and if you go for open peer review, the peer reviewers, in some ways, it wouldn't make a difference because the peer reviewers could still publish their nice bit to the author. And then they could still send me an email saying, Joan, it's good, but it's not good enough for you. Okay. But I also think it means everyone has to work a little bit harder at their peer review, because you need to peer review the paper, write your report, and then go back and say, am I comfortable that everything I've written is going to go out in the public domain? And that's harder. And it's much harder for those of you working in and not in your native language. So I had to review something once and I didn't have a lot of time, and I'd agreed to review it without realizing they used open peer review. And I just saw it and I thought, I don't have time to do this. I really don't have time to produce a full detailed report that I would be comfortable with my name and Lancet Psychiatry editor next to this. So I pulled out.
Thank you.
But some people say, it's better because it makes them do a good job and they're more thorough. So there are strengths and weaknesses. But personally, I'm not a fan.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more question in our chat. Carl Brown asks you also about open peer review. Might open peer review lead to bias reviews?
I think the theory is that open peer review is less biased because then other people can see who's done the review. I think because if people know it's going to be publicly available, they'll work harder. Yeah. So I think there's more transparency and people will try to be fairer. I mean, again, at Lancet, we're really lucky. We get really good reviews. It's very rare that we get one where we think, oh, I can't really send this to the author. I need, you know, we don't generally edit peer reviews, and very, very rarely we'll take a few things out where they're not, just think, not good to say that. So yeah, I think it wouldn't increase bias, it might decrease bias. But then the other bias is you'll get people who are less, you will lose the people who don't want to have their reviews published. So your reviewer pool will get smaller. And that might be people who are shy about their language skills, people who are junior and are shy about criticizing someone more senior and being seen to do that. So open peer review is supposed to increase transparency, but I think it might, your good point, it might introduce bias because you'll only get a subsample of your peer reviewers agreeing to do it.
Yeah, peer review, it's one of the, I would say, more challenging processes. Thank you, Joan, from the author of question. One of the most challenging processes in all the process of publication, I would say. So my question goes, if we can mix open and blind peer review in one journal. So I mean, if of course, if the paper is very good, some people would, you know, agree. I wish to be a reviewer and please put my name near others.
But that's what we do. So we do that at Lancet Psychiatry and at European Science Editing. So that's, it depends what you mean by open peer review, but in terms of if the reviewer wants to identify themselves, they can.
After finalizing their decision.
Yeah, so and they tell us and they put their name at the bottom. So then when the system delivers the review to the author, the name goes with it. And sometimes people sort of write quite friendly notes at the end, or sometimes they just put their name, but they don't have to. And it does mean, as you say, you can mix it. So if somebody does a really good review, but of a paper they think is good, and they're confident, then they'll say, yeah, you know, share my name with the authors. I want the credit for this. But another day you might just go, Joan, why have you sent me this paper? It's really not very good. And I'll just write a few comments you can send to the authors, but don't tell them it's me. You know? I'd rather stay below the radar on this one. So that's where we do it. We leave it with the reviewers. I think many reviewers don't realize that they can sign. So the proportion who sign is very low. And that is something I would like people to know more, because I think many more people would sign their reviews if they realized, but would still have the option not to sign in certain circumstances.
Yeah, yes, a really good practice. We have to think how to adopt it here, and maybe to use it. So we have no more questions. Let me thank you sincerely for this great presentation and for sharing your experience with us. It's important and crucial important for us. We are all here in our Ukrainian chapter support this idea of publication ethics, and we do our best to implement it here in Ukraine during our everyday work.
Well, we're just so pleased if we can help you. I'm going to share, look, my little notebook So I met a lovely lady from, you can tell the name of this, the name of the city. It's
О, Івано-Франківськ.
that one. Yes.
Oh, perfect.
So,
Sorry, sir.
so I met two sisters from here, and they brought me a notebook. And then in Lancet Psychiatry next month, I think we're going to publish a profile of a psychiatrist who's working in Kyiv and still there working. So
Thank you, thank you.
we think about you in Ukraine a lot, or those of you who are still there, and those of you who are not there, but you are, yeah. So anything we can do to help, let us know. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Lovely to see you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ми залишаємося і відпускаємо Джон. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Буквально ще на кілька хвилин, можливо, поділимося останніми новинами про закінчення нашого проєкту з опитування редакторів. Дуже вдячні всім, хто взяв участь, можливо, і в нашій групі, які присутні тут сьогодні. Ми ділилися проміжними результатами і заплановано участь в одній конференції, де будемо вже фіналізувати. Пані Марина Женченко вже завершує, скажімо, впродовж наступних кількох днів це підготовку результатів цього опитування, і я думаю, що на наступних наших засіданнях з задоволенням поділиться результатами з тими, кому було цікаво. Також у нас запланована редакторська школа, на яку ми всіх щиро запрошуємо, і за попередньою домовленістю вона планується з кінця вересня, тобто впродовж жовтня. Це будуть 4 модулі, на яких буде передбачено перша лекція невеличка, десь хвилин за 50 до 50, яку буде вести Піпа Смарт. Вона теж одна із провідних фахівців, головних редакторів і членкиня нашого Європейської асоціації наукових редакторів. Потім передбачено невеличке обговорення в групах. Оскільки у нас загалом розрослася наша група до 34 членів, з яких сьогодні є тільки 14 і доволі багато нових членів, з якими ми ще не знайомі, ми були б раді отримати від вас якийсь фідбек про те, чи плануєте ви брати участь в цій редакторській школі, і чи не хотіли б ви виступили в якості модератора при роботі от після лекцій, для того, щоб обговорити конкретні приклади, кейси, як будуть діяти редактори з урахуванням практики, якою поділилися впродовж лекції. Якщо у вас є такі бажання, ми будемо дуже раді. Також, якщо є якісь питання, які стосуються в майбутніх наших вебінарів, воркшопів, теж дуже відкриті до спілкування і комунікації. І, як вже зазначали наші колеги, наша спільнота об'єднує всіх, хто працює в редакторській сфері, і це інтерактивне спілкування, тобто, якщо в подальшому у вас не буде якби виникати особливого бажання відвідувати семінари і брати активну участь у роботі нашого відділення, ми, на жаль, будемо, мабуть, призупиняти членство, оскільки в межах такої роботи вкрай важко зрозуміти, в чому полягає мета конкретної людини, яка приєднується до спільноти. Я хотіла ще розказати про одну ініціативу, яка була започаткована впродовж буквально останніх років, і вони направили до нас звернення до ІІС. Якщо у когось буде бажання приєднатися до вироблення політики спільної комунікації між редакторами та disaster policy, мається на увазі якісь випадки, disaster, І будемо раді також вас порекомендувати для вступу до цієї групи. Пані Марино, моя заступниця.
Вітаю всіх, шановні колеги. Ну, пані Ірина, в принципі, вже все сказала. Єдине, що хотіла доповнити щодо дослідження, що я думаю, що трошки пізніше, просто час потрібен, щоб узагальнити результати. І до того ж, ми, коли його проводили, то, в принципі, були орієнтовані, і ідея проведення такого дослідження полягала в тому, щоб донести проблеми. Зараз є кілька організацій, які спрямовані на підтримку саме редакторів наукової періодики. Ми хотіли донести цю інформацію про те, як впливає війна на редакції наукової періодики, які потреби є саме до міжнародної спільноти для того, щоб ця підтримка якось у нас зростала, і ми спільними зусиллями могли надавати таку підтримку, чимось допомогти колегам. Тому вони зараз з англійською мовою пізніше адаптуємо результати української мови. Я думаю, що теж їх прилюднимо, поділимося, але на це потрібно трохи часу, бо це не встигаємо. Тому якщо ми вам не надіслали результати, ви брали участь у опитанні, як обіцяли, то перепрошуємо, це обов'язково зробимо, просто не встигаємо, бо буквально тільки 25 серпня ми його закрили і почали вже опрацьовувати результати. Дякую ще раз теж всім, хто долучився.
Також
Ще хотіла уточнити, пані Ірино, я запитувала, чи буде школа, бо це, мабуть, для багатьох важливо, бо ми тут всі пов'язані з університетами і з певною звітністю університетською. Тобто я пам'ятаю, коли була березнева, що ця редакторська школа, ми надавали сертифікати, але чи будуть ці сертифікати якось з годинами, щоб ними у нас могли зараховуватися, щоб ми, скажімо, отримали нові знання, але і мали якусь користь для тої ж звітності, з якою ми, якщо працюємо в університеті, всі пов'язані.
Да, обговорювали це питання з керівництвом ІС, і наразі 7 вересня у нас буде засідання загальне, на якому ми визначимося, що саме треба, яку інформацію зазначити в сертифікаті про проходження, і відповідно, чи це за результатами, чи відвідування. За результатами невеличкого опитування або просто за результатами відвідування таких курсів сертифікат видається. І я одразу ж повідомлю, разом, я сподіваюся, вже з датами проведення цієї школи. На жаль, ми будемо вимушені трошки підлаштовуватися під наших колег з Великобританії в плані часу. У нас є і відмінність в годинах, але наскільки я зрозуміла, що принаймні вечір буде більш-менш підходящим.
А буде потім можливість, вони будуть надавати записи, бо намагатимуся, звичайно, бути, але ж теж це навчальний процес починається. У мене, наприклад, друга зміна і пара о 6:40 – це реальність, тому може так співпасти, що якщо буде за розкладом пара, то а хотілося б послухати, подивитися.
Будемо намагатися узгодити розклад так, щоб було зручніше. Я трошки іноді забуваю, що є ще друга. Також, якщо будуть ініціативи, наприклад, зокрема, і Європейська асоціація розробила форму про відкликання статті, якою ми не перекладали. Ми вже переклали кілька документів, вони є доступними на нашій сторінці на веб-сайті ІС. І у наших журналів нема такої поширеної практики використовувати ці конкретні інструменти: форма відкликання, вимоги відкликання, підстави. І я думаю, що це теж буде дуже корисна ініціатива. Якщо є бажаючі приєднатися або взагалі очолити цю ініціативу, ми будемо дуже раді. Всі інші пропозиції, коментарі, будь ласка, надсилайте. Можливо, хтось з наших нових членів хоче розказати, поділитися своїми враженнями або досвідом. Всіх були дуже раді бачити. Тоді до наступних зустрічей.
Дякую пані Ірині за організацію вебінару, за переклад, і за те, що ми сьогодні всі змогли зустрітися, хоча б онлайн.
Пані Вікторія, у вас
Доброго дня, шановні колеги. Я тут новий член в вашому колективі. Мені дуже приємно було сьогодні долучитися, але так як я була в дорозі, було не зовсім зручно спілкуватися. У вас справді дуже цікаві ідеї, цікаві проблеми, яких ви торкаєтеся. І особливо сьогодні була доповідь, я слухала для нашої української спільноти, мабуть, ексклюзивна десь певною мірою в окремих проблемних місцях, да, не завжди ми маємо той досвід, який має європейські редактори і ця індустрія публікаційна, редакторська. От мене, наприклад, цікавить питання редагування термінології, оскільки більшою мірою займаюся проблемами термінології. І сьогодні, наприклад, от термінологія війни, яку активно використовують в медіа, як її представляють в різних країнах, висвітлюють цю проблему і як редактори працюють із редагуванням саме цього шару лексики. Тому от для мене була б, наприклад, цікавою така тема дискусії нашої. Як сьогодні працюють редакторські колективи, висвітлюючи проблеми в Україні і, зокрема, використовуючи термінологію війни в своїх дослідженнях.
Вікторія Петрівна, да, добрий вечір, рада вас бачити, хоча б онлайн. Я так думаю, що вже після школи, десь на листопад-грудень, так, пані Ірино, ми можемо запланувати якийсь воркшоп, і якраз можна було би за той час підготуватися і визначитися з темами, і зібрати такий досвід, можливо, у колег з інших регіональних відділень, запросити їх до нас виступити і провести такий якийсь вебінар саме з проблем термінології для редакторів нашої.
Чи саме торкаються цієї проблеми от в іноземних виданнях? Тому що колись було засідання термінологічної Європейської асоціації термінологів, і от вони говорили, що медійники доволі некоректно використовують часто термінологію, оскільки їм швидко потрібно подати інформацію, і вони її не завжди правильно і коректно використовують. Є тут багато різних таких дискусійних питань в цьому аспекті. Проблеми перекладу, да, теж.
Так. Якраз ми теж, пані Ярославе, вже в контексті Української асоціації редакторів теж думали про такий вебінар термінології, і якраз думали про те, що обов'язково треба буде запросити вас як фахівця і подумати про тему, яка могла б бути цікава нашій аудиторії. І нашого регіонального відділення Європейської асоціації і Української асоціації редакторів ми могли спільно зробити якийсь вебінар, обговорити цю тему, визначитися з якимось, можливо, гайдлайн, створити щось таке, що могло би помічне, і чи могли би послуговуватися. Фактично зараз немає співтя редакторам. Кожен працює сам по собі, і наша місія фактично як асоціації фахових – це збирати якийсь досвід, узагальнювати і пропонувати щось, можливо.
Ну, що якщо ми переглянемо, наприклад, сучасні мережі, да, там телеграм-канали, там ще там Фейсбук, да, тобто ця термінологія дуже різноманітна, така різнобій подається, висвітлення тієї самої події, да, і тут дуже багато цікавих є таких моментів. Добре, дякую за увагу. Вибачте, що може багато часу перебрала.
Поки вам тільки, пані Вікторія, дякую. І будь вдячні, якщо ви будете знову збирати якісь, я знаю, що у вас є багато матеріалів, і потім можна буде на базі щось підготувати і зробити корисне для всіх, оприлюднити, поширити для того, щоб це було в нашому середовищі.
Поміркуємо якось. Так,
Добре,
якось в цьому аспекті треба теж знайти так само часу. Трохи дякую.
Так, для всього треба знайти час.
Так, і за організацію дуже дякую пані Ірині, так само і вам, пані Марина.
Дякуємо, пані Вікторія. Ми насправді дуже раді, що ви до нас приєдналися, і ми вже обговорювали, які можливо будуть у нас перспективи співробітництва в межах і цього відділення. І нам надзвичайно цікаво було б, враховуючи те, що асоціація більше дотична до наукового видавництва. Це мова йде більше про наукові фахові видання, як у нас вони називаються, або Science Scholar Journals, то навіть у нас з початку війни поставало питання, чи можна дозволити авторські стилі в деяких випадках, коли автори хотіли виразити більше своє суб'єктивне ставлення до певних явищ, і в тому числі до понять, і як це вирішували різні журнали. І я думаю, що тут наразі буде корисним і поділитися практикою. Зокрема, в нашій асоціації є відділення хорватське, вони теж пережили надзвичайно трагічні події, і близькі зараз нам і інші теж представники регіональних відділень готові ділитися досвідом. Тому ми можемо абсолютно відреагувати на такий запит. Пані Марина, ближче до вас професійно, я думаю, тому що ми редактори за призванням більше, ніж за професією, і ми з задоволенням приєднаємося. Я думаю, що Європейська асоціація надасть всі необхідні і можливі інформацію для того, щоб ми змогли нею скористатися. Дякую вам ще раз. Можливо, ще хтось хоче виступити? Пане Тарасе, ви ще з нами?
Звичайно, що я з вами. Доброго вечора усім. Я просто уважно слухаю. Звичайно, ці всі моменти, які стосуються публікаційної етики і от таких різних речей, вони ще у нас не прижилися. Так, це річ, яку потрібно нести в маси. І нею треба окремо займатися, нею треба окремо опікуватися. Звичайно, це є цікаві речі, і багато що дає чим побільше дивитися десь.
Ділитися вашими враженнями від... Ви були на кількох цих уроках цієї школи?
Так, звичайно. Я був на 3, тому що там через технічну помилку якось на першу я не зумів попасти, а вже на 3 я потім був. Звичайно, ці аспекти, що були, наприклад, озвучені сьогодні, наприклад, цікаво щодо того, як правильно подавати розширену статтю, яка вже була раніше в ролі доповіді на конференції. Це так само має бути представлено і має бути прописано, що це є розширена версія такої-то роботи, яка була представлена. Мав якраз такий випадок літом, коли працював з цим, і автори то повідомили, що так то було, але ще і правильно це подати, що як воно має бути, як то along with the paper, так, як воно має бути. Тобто ці всі речі, до них наша наукова спільнота, вона ще не розуміє, що це таке є і чому це важливо. Так, тому це потрібно, всі ці практики і політики добре, коли вони є прописані, але їх ніхто не читає, будьмо чесні. Тут так само треба...
Абсолютно вірно.
Треба підходити з балансом. Воно все повинно бути в балансі. Вони повинні бути короткі, і можливо, щоб якщо редактори будуть завертати по декілька разів за некоректне подання чи невідсутність певної декларації, ті ж самі конфлікти інтересів, чи щось там, тоді можливо вони будуть більше до цього ставитися. Якось так. Редакційна така редакторська школа це однозначно потрібно. Це цікаво, особливо коли заставляють кожного трошки висловитися, кожному щось сказати. Так, хтось, в когось досвіду більше, в когось досвіду менше, в когось були унікальні випадки. Це дуже цікаво. Тому я всім однозначно рекомендую, хто вже був, ще раз прийти, хто не був, обов'язково відвідати. Я в будь-якому випадку буду старатися, щоб я попав на неї.
Обов'язково, з вашим сертифікатом ви маєте бути модератором.
Ні, можливо, хтось захоче. Я не відмовляюся, але якщо є бажаючі, то я, звичайно, місце уступлю.
Ні, коли треба щось зробити, то не треба місцем поступатися, треба робити.
Ні, тому що можуть бути люди ініціативні, які хочуть себе попробувати також і в такій ролі, то я тільки за. Тобто Якщо скажуть, що нема кому і треба, то добре, я не відмовляюся. Але це я особливо рекомендую, хто ще не був, обов'язково туди це відвідати. З сертифікатом чи без, з годинами чи без. Я не знаю насправді, як в інших галузях. У нас є така річ, яка зараз торкнулася науково-педагогічних працівників в медицині. Є такий центр тестування, і він зараз реформований у центр тестування і постійного підвищення кваліфікації працівників. Ну, вони щось роблять на кшталт американської моделі, де от постійне самовдосконалення, постійне навчання. І там зараз для медиків прописано те, щоб давати сертифікат, за який зараховуються якісь години чи бали, потрібно, щоб були прописані результати навчання. Тобто на сертифікаті не просто години, а ще з визначеними чіткими програмними результатами. Тому не знати, наприклад, яка інституція буде, з яким критерієм до цього підходити. Це буде достатньо, наприклад, чисто годин з вказанням, чи, можливо, в певному випадку треба буде ще й підходити з цією метою. Ну, кажу чесно, я б чисто заради того, щоб відвідати, навіть без сертифіката. Це дуже корисно для саморозвитку, це однозначно. Тому всім рекомендую ще раз.
Дякую вам дуже, але в будь-якому випадку ми задамо таке питання. Я думаю, що фактично 4 модулі, які тривають впродовж 4 годин кожен, і треба готуватися. Я думаю, що можна це відповідну позначку зробити в сертифікаті. Про це цьому на заваді нічого не стане. Тим більше, що це асоціація, яка може проводити редакторську школу. Тому я впевнена, що ми дійдемо згоди певної. І я думаю, що є варіант, коли особа може проявити ініціативу, ми і таким дамо дорогу. А є варіант, коли вас громада уповноважить бути модератором, оскільки у вас вже є досвід, то чекайте інструкцій подальших, і ми з вами просто узгодимо час, який вам буде зручно відповідно до вашого графіку навчання чи будь-якого основного виду роботи.
Будемо. То вже таке, то вже не проблема. Я думаю, якось на лад вийдемо. То не є аж так критично. В моєму випадку, я думаю, що це буде достатньо реально.
Обов'язково. Чудово. Тоді я дуже вдячна всім за цей чудовий воркшоп. Для себе навіть почула дуже багато нового. Всіх дуже рада бачити. Бажаю всім безпеки, миру скорішого і подальшого процвітання всім і всій нашій країні.
Дякую, навзаєм.
Навзаєм, до побачення.
До побачення.
Дякую, до побачення всім.